Hello and welcome to this edition of Assembly Calendar. I'm Visscher. Our guest today is New York State Assemblyman Dean Murray. Dean represents the 3rd Assembly District, which comprises parts of Suffolk County, including Medford and Mastic Beach. I'm Visscher. Thank you very much for joining us today. As of this taping, it is March 30th, Wednesday, March 30th, and leaders are when I say leaders, I'm referring to the Speaker of the Assembly, the Senate Majority Leader, and the Governor have been meeting to hash out the budget and hope that it is passed by the April 1 deadline, which is the beginning of the new fiscal year. And we're going to discuss with Dean to get an update in terms of how things are going with that. It's always nice to see you, sir.
It's good to see you as well.
So keep in mind that likely when you see this tape, the show, the budget will have already passed. So we're basically working through the details as we know them at this point. What have you heard? Where do things stand at this point?
As you said, it will pass despite my objections, because what we're hearing right now is that the minimum wage will be rammed through, whether we like it or not, kind of thing. And I think it's unfortunate. I think we needed more discussion on that, because as much as it's being pitched that this will help the economy, there are also many, many studies and reports and actual evidence to the contrary. In fact, it will likely cost upwards of, we've heard reports of up to 200,000 jobs in the state of New York, across the state. So, it's troublesome that we're ramming this through and doing so without helping small businesses, our farms, our not-for-profits. So I think this is, I think it's a disaster waiting to happen, unfortunately.
They have yet to hash out the details of education spending, and that's always a big one at this point.
Right. And they usually save that to the end, because that's their major bargaining chip, if you will. So I am confident that we will, when all is said and done and the dust settles, we will completely eliminate the GEA, the Gap Elimination Adjustment, which frankly should have been done. Honestly, it should have been done a couple of years ago, because it was put in place in the 2009-2010 period, when we were, as a state, $10 billion in the hole, hence the gap. But we filled that gap, and in fact are now in the positive and not in the negative. Therefore, we should have eliminated the GEA and restored the full state aid to the school districts.
If I could draw you out on education specifically as it addresses Common Core, there have been no really significant changes, and I know the upcoming Common Core tests, which are on the minds of a lot of New Yorkers, parents in New York State, are right around the corner. Yeah. So nothing in this budget addresses Common Core testing.
No, and one of the things we do have to tackle is there is a, you've heard of the APPR, which is the teacher evaluations. They are tied to those tests. Now, that's been put on hold for about 4 years. However, there is still a requirement lingering out there in state law that requires all of the school districts to have their APPR plan in place by this September. And if they don't, they could lose some state aid funding. So we have to address that issue, because now it's kind of a moot point now that the APPR has been pushed off and there's a moratorium for about the next 3.5, 4 years. So we have to handle that. I was hoping that would be in the budget. I don't think it is. So we're going to have to definitely tackle that issue right outside of the budget.
You talk about state costs, the rising of taxes. I believe that this budget is going to spend beyond, or at least the initial estimates spend beyond the 2% spending cap in New York State. You're raising taxes. This is by the tune of, some estimates, $5.6 billion. And then you talk about unfunded mandates. Medicaid specifically, this budget looks to shift, at least the talk right now, to shift the costs of Medicaid reimbursement to New York City.
Right. There is talk of that. That's been the pushback. That's been what's holding up some of the negotiations. Obviously, those from New York City don't want that.
But they spend, in terms of amounts.
Yeah.
I believe New York City spends 70% of Medicaid dollars.
Right, and listen, we've been saying this all along, and Matt, I have to tell you, this is something that really gets sticks in my craw, if you will, because we say it over and over again, and by we I mean our minority conference, the Assembly Republicans. We've said over and over again, there is fraud, waste, and abuse in the Medicaid system. We need to clean it up. It's been shown that there's fraud to the tunes of billions of dollars, and yet we hear the same thing. Whenever we bring that up, You hear that big sigh, there you guys go again. Well, you know what? How about if we address it for once? Just, you want to shut us up? Let's address the fraud, waste, and abuse once and for all. You know, there have been undercover reports by news outlets that have shown some of the incredible waste and abuse in the Medicaid system, and yet we do nothing about it. If we were to just tackle it, you want to shut us up? Tackle that problem, tackle that issue, and let's save literally billions of dollars.
And so, again, I want to emphasize the budget likely to be passed by a message of necessity,
Right,
which is not all that uncommon because the bills, as of this taping, would have had to be printed on Monday evening to sit 3 days on members' desks for you to read through the bills, which never really happens.
Right. So what the governor's going to do, so he can keep his on-time record with the budgets, is now that we've passed that deadline, he will issue a message of necessity, and we will receive the bills and be voting on the bills within the same time frame.
And that must be frustrating on behalf of many of the members who the bills are put in front of you, and you have virtually no time to read them.
Oh, we're literally scrambling on our tablet as we're, okay, what section are we on? Let's look at this while we're debating. I mean, it's extremely frustrating. It really is. Mainly because we've been, again, as a conference, we've been yelling about let's have more openness, more transparency in the process of putting together the budget. Yet it's, again, 3 men in a room, and it keeps happening over and over. This year's been one of the worst as far as, being kept in the dark.
Secrecy.
Absolutely. And so what happens is we get it plopped on our desk with, sometimes an hour or so to go before we're debating that bill with a stack of papers like this high. I mean, it really is ridiculous. It's shameful.
Legislative reform, specifically term limits for legislative leaders, and also pension forfeiture. It seems as if talk for these two pieces of legislation to make significant changes to the process as it happens in the state assembly is becoming an increasingly mute topic. There's got to be some concern there.
Well, an increasingly ignored topic. We keep bringing it up, it keeps getting ignored. We put up resolutions to change the rules. We've put those forward and they were voted down by the majority. Now the majority then releases its list of so-called reforms, and don't get me wrong, there were a couple in there that were pretty good. In fact, they finally listened to my argument. I had a bill that calls for the fiscal implication notes to be on every single bill to show exactly where the funding's come from, because then you can identify unfunded mandates immediately. So the fiscal impact notes now will be required to be on the bills that show, is the money coming from the state, or will it have a fiscal impact to the locality? If it is to the locality, it's an unfunded mandate. So that was a nice move forward, and I was glad to see that in there. But the major ones that you were talking about, again, mysteriously left out of the reforms.
Mixed martial arts, which has been on the docket, so to speak, for about 7 years now, if I'm not mistaken, has been flip-flopped back and forth like a football, thrown between the Senate and the Assembly. The Senate has passed it numerous times, thrown back to the New York State Assembly, and was held up by then Speaker of the Assembly, Sheldon Silver. The bill finally made it to the floor earlier in the week, and you spoke on that bill quite eloquently. You spoke on that measure. So let's go ahead and take a look at that, and then we'll come back and get some further thoughts from you on the passage of mixed martial arts.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Speaker for allowing this bill to finally come to the floor for an up and down vote. There's been much support, and it's about time we got it to the floor so we can actually vote on this bill and discuss issues that have been brought up during debate. I especially want to thank the sponsor of the bill, who I think has done a tremendous job. If you notice, this is a C print. That means there's been some amendments made to it. That shows that the sponsor of the bill has listened to many of the concerns, that there have been concerns brought forward. He's listened, and he sat with the people involved and made changes that were necessary. Changes that are good, that make this a better bill. Now, first, I have to say this. I've been watching mixed martial arts for a long time. I've yet to see anyone thrown into a cage. I've seen adults enter the cage to participate in something they've trained for years and years. to get into it and do a profession that they chose. You know, these professionals have been doing this since they were young kids. And by the way, martial arts in itself, it does teach self-defense. It teaches discipline, which is why many karate classes and other martial arts have quite a few children in these classes. It teaches them the discipline that they need. So, you know, as I said, I've yet to see anybody thrown into a cage. They've willingly gone in to participate in a sport that they love and that they've been training for and to participate in for years.
So, Assemblyman, it was interesting. I was watching that debate quite lively. It took about a couple of hours at least.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it was a debate that you often don't see nowadays in the New York City Assembly, where a bill of stature comes to the floor and it's debated on both sides with passionate arguments. It was interesting that on the Democratic side, many of the members got up and were arguing that it's a violent, caged fighting sport that should not be publicly rubber stamped, if you will, by the state. And your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, it was, again, many who spoke were not really educated in the sport. They don't realize what kind of changes and advancements have been made since it was banned by Governor Pataki in the mid-90s. At that time, it was kind of the Wild West there. It was extremely violent, very few rules. But since that time, they have instituted quite a few rules and quite a few advancements and safety measures for the fighters. In fact, their concussion protocol in the sport is actually stronger and more stringent than the NFL's. And I know that's a big issue right now in the NFL, is talking about concussions and head trauma. So they are very, very aware of this, and they've put rules in place to protect the fighters. As I mentioned in that statement, that was a C print, which means there were several amendments to the bill. Some of those amendments were putting in place health care measures or insurance measures for the actual participants in these events. So really, I commend the sponsor. He listened to many of the concerns. We all worked together very, very hard to put together a good bill. And more importantly, too, we were the last state in the union where this was not legal. So we put together a bill that's probably one of the best in the nation on all sides. And now we've joined the rest of the nation. It is now legal. The millions and millions of fans in New York can now go and see their favorite fighters in person. To participate.
And you talk about the residual impact to the local community in terms of tourism dollars, people coming in to see these events and spending money.
Oh, these events are big. I mean, when they come in for a weekend, it starts on a Thursday or Friday. They do their weigh-ins and, you know, all this back and forth, and it's quite the theatrical event there, but it brings in many, many, many fans. And then they spend the entire weekend there. So they're, you know, while they're during the day before the fight at night, you know, they're going out to restaurants, they're sightseeing, they're buying gifts and touring the area. And then they stay after the fight and they stay for the rest of the weekend. And then they say, you know, this was really great. We want to come back again. So this is a way to generate revenue and tourism dollars like nothing we've done in years.
Real quickly, with about 30 seconds left, when will this bill take effect? So in other words, will this, now that it's been passed, will it affect matches this year in the state?
Yeah, it will. As soon as the governor signs the bill into law, it's 120 days from then, because the New York State Athletic Commission still needs to promulgate the rules that they're putting in place. So it'll be 120 days. We're targeting like an August, September. First big fight supposed to be November.
We are out of time. Always a pleasure to see you. If you'd like to reach out to Assemblyman Dean Murray, you can do so by contacting his district office. The information is on your screen, 1735 North Ocean Avenue, Suite A, Medford 11763, 631-207-0073. You can email the Assemblyman at murrayd@assembly.state.ny.us. We also would like to mention that the Assemblyman is available on social media, on Facebook specifically. Thank you very much for joining us today. Until next time, this has been Assembly Calendar.